the chair. And it was whilst a few people had concerns about the governance arrangement, because obviously no portfolios, what does that mean? And so I said I'd take it temporarily until that was resolved, because I have enough figure outside of this. So now some of those questions have been answered, happy to open back out to see if anyone's put themselves forward with the chair. So that's anybody agree? Seconded? Fine. Okay, then. Brilliant. Okay, then. So Peter will be the chair. Would you like to take over the meeting?
I'm with you, Sharon, but whether you want to.
More than happy. More than happy.
All right.
Okay, let's swap.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your support. That was that did show the hands, but obviously straight into the chair for the first time, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Can I first of all ask whether we've got any apologies, please, Linda?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Burden, Councillor O'Boyle and Sue Summers. Thank you.
Right. Any declarations of interest from anyone? Thank you. No. Right. In terms of chair's remarks, I don't think there's going to be many, as it's my first meeting. This is a really important board in terms of the combined authority, and in terms of the new mayor and in fact the new government. I think this is going to be the key board that actually drives investment and drives the growth that everybody's looking for. I think the decisions we take at this meeting are probably some of the most important for the West Midlands and its future. So I do hope that going forward, I recognise that this is a summer period that actually we get as full attendance as possible going forward. I move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the 24th of June. Just wondering whether everybody's happy with those. Yes. Everybody accept them as a true record then? Yep. Okay. Right, at this point then we go over to Ian Martin then and the investment programme update, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The regular item, the funding commitment, as at the end of June's unchanged policy, 848.4 million versus the funding available to confirmed and constraints, 871 million approved by the WCA4. And the difference it makes up the 871 is fully utilised by the earmark contributions approved by the CA4. Costs incurred at the end of June were 610.7 million, so further 10.7 million pounds last report. CA officers have not exercised their delegated powers to approve business cases since the last meeting, so we don't need to report on that item. I would still mention kind of that the interim gateway review is still with DLUD. Who are advising us on what exactly they would like to produce. It's obviously some delays, but it is at their end and works ongoing. But so I can move on to no questions. I can move on to IP dashboard.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for you?
And that, Chair, I think for everyone's benefit, that we have previously gone through a gateway review of this board. And I think the outcome of that review, that this board has fulfilled its duties with regard to investments for growth in the West Midlands. And hopefully the next review, when it comes through, will say something in a very similar vein. So it's just a comment.
Anyone else? Anyone on the screen want to ask any questions? No? If I could pick up on a couple of points, so there's a few red-rated schemes in here. What's being done to progress them, and the other thing is, are there any real significant concerns about whether there's going to be an ability to deliver in some cases? And the other thing is, are there any schemes that are reliant on third-party funding that might expire?
Yeah, we can certainly pick up on that. So in terms of the, oh, sorry,
No, I'll wait for you to say what you said.
So to introduce the investment program dashboard, there's 84 projects kind of recorded there where the investment program provided funding. So I always say that includes various sub-projects from those, so that may well increase in the future, but we've mostly got business cases all separated out so we can see outputs, etc., and timing for each one. 30 of those have reached completion as far as the bit that we've funded is concerned, and those are going through valuation. You're correct, Chair, in terms of on red status, there are 23 projects. They're all experiencing delays. That means that we do have 43% of our live projects that are red rated, which is significant. 14 of those projects are subject to a change request. They're the ones related to Solihull. That change request has been submitted. I was speaking of that to our assurance appraisal team this morning, and we are going to ask for a little bit more information on that in terms of how projects are running and update before we produce that. But because of the size of that, I believe that it will be under a delegated kind of power to agree the change request, unless I find something controversial in there, in which case I probably will refer it to this board. But yes, that there's projects that are being delayed. Some of it is actually chasing for information with very busy local authority officers, but it really does mean that we do need to get that information and seek the cooperation of our colleagues in providing those updates, because it's quite critical, not only keeping things in budget, but also delivering outputs as soon as possible for the region. So time is an important factor on these.
So are there any that are reliant on the third-party funding?
Yeah, many of the, I couldn't give you a direct answer, but many of the combined authority investment programme projects are reliant on third-party funding. That's one of the questions that I've actually asked on the Solihull one as well. So investment programme, from its very setup, funded the early stages of a lot of projects to get a business case completed. So what's often known as a strategic outline case, and in some cases getting it to an outline business case. You need to provide funding quite often for the investigations to prove the case, etc., which local authorities have struggled with actually having that. If you don't have the strategic, or if you've not got to an outline business case, then there's nothing really to submit for the further funding. The investment programme did fund a lot of that activity. And it is obviously critical then that the local authorities that develop these strategic outline cases and gone into an outline business case have got sight of funding. I suppose it's incumbent on the regions really to work with those projects where a good case is approved to identify and help find that funding.
If you've got them coming up to expire, then the pressure is on then to try and turn it round in some way, can't it?
Yeah, it's expiry of the product. I mean, often with these early stages, it's the production of the outline business case that is running behind.
Councillor Slide.
Chair, I think we all need to recognise that the £870 million that was in the investment programme is not fully funded on all of those projects, and clearly they are related to a number of other programmes that are being conducted by bodies who are not responsible for this to this board. I'm pleased to see that the 14 Solihull projects have now advanced to change request. So in essence, it's just simply a case of extending the time to deliver those. And I would add that an enormous number of those UKC contracts are in fact related to the HS2 programme with regard to access to land and development and such like. So I don't think anything can be taken from the fact that they've been delayed. It's not been delayed by the local authorities' commitments. And as former chairman of the Urban Growth Company, we've delivered an awful lot of the UKC infrastructure that's required to support the Arden Cross development. But they've now come through, which I think we've been asking for some time, to change request. And I think when we see the change request, we can see exactly what the implications are with regard to the final delivery point on those items. So I'm relatively content from our perspective in Solihull that we've now moved forward and the change requests are available to us to actually decide whether we support them or not.
Right, do we have any other questions at all or points to make?
If I may, Chair. Mark Snowden from Walsall Council. New to this, so excuse me if you already covered this. Just on the change requests, can I just request, why are we having to make such change requests at such a high volume? Is it because the original project wasn't fully, not costed, but timeframes put in there? It just, to the public, what I'm seeing from the public and the feedback in Walsall is, it looks like chaos whereby you're planning something, then the expectation is it'll be delivered, and you're constantly moving the goalposts. So it just beggars belief that we've got all of these all under change requests, which is just, kicking it into the long grass in some respects.
I'll throw up to Ian to answer that, but I think a lot of local authorities, even with their own schemes, whether it's at town level or whatever, have had to go back and really look at whether the projects are affordable and whether they've got sufficient backup funding to cover some of the inflationary costs that we've seen over the last couple of years. So I think that's part of it, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But a bit more detail on the bone, I would imagine.
No, we've stuck from I say we go out to the local authorities. The local authorities delivering kind of as sponsors of these projects in the majority of cases in investment programs. We go out to the local authorities and we talk to them about what has actually happened on their projects. For extension, there's a multitude of reasons. Inflationary pressures have meant not necessarily a cost increase, but a replanning of what the works are going to be and how they're being done. And there is a tendency for people to wait and kind of batch them together when they go through a change request, which you're right, from an outside point of view, that doesn't look good. And I don't like it either, because that means that you end up with a big batch of projects and you're trying to deal with it administratively kind of in one go. When they arrive here, it takes longer. So we are trying to work with local authority colleagues to do it in smaller numbers rather than batch it all together and put it in as one. I would say on the Solihull ones, though, kind of they are kind of sub-projects of a programme.
That's right.
So kind of we did deliberately break them out rather than you see one project of our programme of 35 million. We break them out, and the reason we break them out is each one's got very different outputs and are very different in terms of their projects. They didn't fit well in a programme. We could have easily called it a programme.
Well,
yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. And I do emphasise the point, the relationship with other bodies that have to basically bring matters forward. So if you take the A46, for instance, that is very much subject to Warwickshire's local plan to actually be able to be delivered on the A46 road improvements. The other thing, of course, is a lot of these programmes are actually dependent on government funding through particularly the CRSTS. So I think, the CRSTS has now been signed off. We have a clear programme of business cases that have gone forward to DLUC. And basically, we take a report later today which shows exactly what the status of all those CRSTS programs is within the scheme of things up to delivery in 2027. So I think it's complex. I think that's the point. It's a complex picture. It's not always in the hands of this authority to actually drive these matters forward. It can relate, it's quite simply, to matters such as delivery of the local plan. And we all know that the inspector can take time in approving local plans. So I think it's good where we are, but we always have to recognise that other people can influence exactly what those delivery dates might be ultimately.
Councillor Statham.
Thank you, Chair. I do think it's vital for the communications to flush that out. And what it said in the narrative, it is a moving feast, it is complex, but the headline numbers just look awful in terms of where we've been, where we're going, ability to deliver, on time and on cost is absolutely vital. And the headline numbers suggest we're not doing that. So it's important to flush out the reasons why rather than a bland 43% of now on subject to change request or whatever.
I think, Ian, maybe we need to put a rider in the minutes. And is it something we could do through PR? You're thinking about the public perception, aren't you, out there?
Yeah, I'm coming from the public perception and local press, particularly in the borough of Walsall with railway stations and other things, and everything seeming to either be kicked into the long grass or potentially cancelled. How that narrative is communicated and what the real obstacles are, rather than just the bureaucracy of it. So what the real obstacles are.
I think, Ian, this is a comms issue, isn't it? In terms of getting the message over. I don't know where.
Yeah, I'll certainly take away and view this board. It's very much its job is monitoring, evaluation, as well as just approving things. So I'm really pleased with you giving it the attention. I would say this is the worst it's ever looked, but that's kind of, so normally it doesn't look this bad, and it's largely these batch things. But the assistance and help across all local authorities where there's delivery there, it helps me and my team in terms of getting up-to-date pictures and getting them before things have expired. Usually is really where you want to get to. They've got valid reasons, but it's not a good look when things are allowed to expire. So I appreciate you actually paying attention to it and bringing it to the attention of the board as well. Thank you.
That Councillor Statham, you're new to the board, but you're obviously on the ball, and that's brilliant.
Councillor Hughes,
Yeah.
Sorry, and apologies that I'm not in person today. I would normally be in person. But I think as Ian's just said there, this is a really helpful conversation for us in terms of being able to provide the focus that we need on the schemes that are currently flagging amber and red. And I think, yes, absolutely, Ian and I will take the action to pick up around the comms, but also I think we will take an action to make sure that when we come back to the next update to the next investment board, we will make sure that we've got we've talked to Solihull and Coventry officers in terms of these 43% that are drifting, and make sure that we come back with a very clear mitigation and action plan around recovery of the position.
That'll be really useful, Linda, and give some reassurance to members. Thank you for that. So if we can then move on, if there's no other questions, move on to the recommendations. There are 3 recommendations there. Are they all 3? Thank you. Right. We then move on to the update report for the City Regional Transport Settlement Q4. Can I throw over to?
We've got Sandy James,
Oh,
who's
Sandy,
presenting
yeah.
on behalf of.
Oh, Sandy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm not Colbeat. I'm Sandeep Shingadia. I'm Director of Strategic Partnerships and Integration. But as the Deputy SRO for the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, it's quite appropriate that I present this report in Carl's absence. So the paper takes you through where we are with our current programming and progress updates on the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. That really does flow off the tongue. And where we've been working with our local authority partners on that reporting. And Councillor Slay, if I may, I mean, you've touched on a really important point here around the interdependencies between this programme and other funding programmes, which all need to come together as part of the overall mix for delivery across the West Midlands. Now, in terms of the overview of the CRSTS programme, it really is around driving growth and productivity, decarbonising transport, levelling up services and areas across the West Midlands. We have had a number of change requests that have gone through the programme. That was largely to do with rail packages 1 and 2, and that was agreed in November in 2023. We also had the approval of the inclusion of Dudley Interchange into the programme, which was in May 2023. Now, DfT did approve the rebased programme, which was submitted early in October, earlier this year in March, and following the discussion at CA board on Friday around the capital pressures, so there may well be a requirement to undertake a further round or consolidated round of change controls to make sure we are reflecting the most up-to-date conditions for the programme. For those of you who are familiar with it, we do have some fairly extensive and expansive requirements around monitoring, evaluation and reporting, and the report that is presented here today is part of the annual reporting that we undertake for DfT, but also some very detailed monitoring and evaluation, and there is further detail within the report around that. Now, as I've said, the information that is required for monitoring purposes is far more expansive than other funding streams that we have worked on recently, and it does mean that we do have to engage significantly with our scheme leads and sponsors across the local authorities and internally. But it does provide us with a good benchmark in terms of understanding the health of those current projects and programmes and where they are in terms of overall delivery. The overall funding programme is just over £1 billion, and as of where we are at the end of March 2024, we have approved funding totals of 565 million. It is also noted that we are required to maintain a soft contingency of 100 million of unapproved funding until the end of year 3, being 31st of March 2025, and that really is there to counter some of those challenges that Ian and Councillor Slay have already picked up around inflationary cost pressures, etc., that are having an impact on the overall programme. There are some risks that are set out in the report. I've touched on one of those already around inflationary cost pressures. There is also the other aspect around the relative maturity of schemes and having to go, not just having to go, absolutely going through engagement and public consultation and dealing with any objections, etc., as they arise, particularly on aspects such as road space reallocation, which can be trickier to navigate through for residents and businesses. But again, it comes down to understanding the overarching benefits. We do have a very back-ended programme with nearly half the projects are currently reporting to complete in the final year of the programme, and that is something that we are keeping an eye on. And the other aspect is just the general issues that we've seen over the past couple of years in terms of the supply chain and the capacity within that to be able to deliver those programmes within the scope and timescales that we have seen. The other aspect is dealing with just the simultaneous impact on our networks as that construction activity comes forward. So trying to get a good balance of all of that as we continue to work on those project programmes. We have a spend to date at the moment of around 210 million. Now, that is a little bit behind where we would like to be, but it's not considered unreasonable considering some of the delays that we've had with through DfT in terms of agreeing some of the rebaselined position. So that is something that we will continue to work through. And there is some detail on the local contributions. And again, this is where it picks up other funding sources that are being captured as local contributions within the overarching programme. As my role as Deputy SRO has also meant we can put some senior level oversight with all of our local authority partners and act as a single point of contact to help navigate any issues or concerns as projects move through the project lifecycle and through our SAF process. I completely understand that's not always been an easy process, but we are working through some of the issues, particularly around resourcing, to make sure we are trying to work through in a timely fashion those business cases as they come through the SAF process and ensure that we get the right approvals in place at the various stage gates required. So, Chair, I will leave it at that. I will just make note of the two appendices. So we have the first appendix, which are the various reporting charts, just showing some of the aspects that I've already picked up. The second appendix is the actual report that will be going to DFT as our position at the end of the 23-24 financial year. I'm happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions at all, any members?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of what we've just been discussing, in terms of we've got a budget risk at 19% and schedule risks at 18%. If we're already in a position to do that now, I'd suggest we make decisions sooner rather than later, so we're managing expectation and comms moving forward.
Absolutely. So as we've just completed the piece of work on the capital pressures, which was presented to CA board on Friday, we have a series of conversations lined up with all of our local authority partners around being very clear on the programme, where they see their biggest risks, where are the biggest priorities in terms of delivery, and make sure we can have a consolidated position over the next 2 months around what does that programme actually look like going forwards. There are a number of considerations that we need to take into account with that, particularly things like the local contribution element, but also the outputs that we said we would deliver as part of this overall programme and the value for money that the overall programme needs to meet and deliver against. But you're absolutely right, Councillor, it's something that we are working through now as those risks are emerging.
Sky.
So I welcome the report. It's very comprehensive. It tells us where we are with each of the projects that we actually agreed in the business case in 2022. As my colleague said, 19% have a financial challenge quite clearly. It doesn't mean that they can't be delivered. And in fact, we are, if you look at the programmes, we are still on target to deliver those programmes in 2027 when the CRSTS funding actually runs out. I just want to make a point on the governance around this. I'm going to separate rail packages 1 and 2 and just simply talk about CRSTS because it did come up for debate at the Combined Authority Board on Friday, and it came as a surprise, I think, to some people when the issue was raised as to how these programmes were governed. From signing off, as we did in, I think, March 2022 with DFT, there has been a regular set of reports coming through this board on a quarterly basis, not necessarily on the date of the quarter, on a quarterly basis to actually tell us where each of those programmes lies. So I think from a governance perspective, we've demonstrated that we have a pretty close eye on what's been going on with CRSTS, clearly to the satisfaction of DFT, who I think have allowed rebase, they've allowed some changes to be made, and they've accepted that we've governed it in the way that it should be governed. Rail Package 1 and 2, I think, is a bit more of a challenge. Because I think we've seen with Rail Package 1 and 2, you know, with the best will in the world, we actually undertake to do things such as Pineapple Road Station, for instance. But when you actually start getting into the technical issues around digging up the ground and who's responsible for what and who's not, I think those are issues where we do need to learn some lessons. So I certainly welcome Rail Package 1 and 2 being looked at in some detail where we find that there have been challenges. And I know if Councillor Bird were here, he'd certainly be raising some issues that he's previously raised at this board. But I think from a governance perspective, we took up Rail Package 1 and 2 fairly late. But I think this board has, again, shown that it can actually identify where the challenges lie. I would make one point, the issue of scheduling, the issue of cost and the 19%, they actually may be one and the same. It may not be 19% plus 14% for whatever. So I think it would be helpful at some point in time to understand where the 19% interrelated to the 14%. So we know, are those the same programmes? And I think we've discussed previously the issue of management of programmes within the organisation. And I think we've basically improved some of the arrangements we've got in place to actually manage programmes going forward. So all in all, I think the report is very good. I think it gives a clear picture, but I do make the comment with regard to Rail Packages 1 and 2, and we have found some difficulties in taking those programmes forward. And I hope would accept that that's given in good faith. That, I'm not trying to create difficulty.
Thank you, Councillor Slay. And yes, absolutely happy to pick up the 19% versus the 14. The two things are strictly linked. It's not a simple case of yes, that plus that, because the two things drive each other. Again, in terms of maturing as an organisation, the last few years have seen the scale and pace of delivery, which has been unprecedented. So there are lots of lessons to be learned, absolutely, from the rail space as well as other projects, and those are being fed back into the programs that we are now taking forward. There has always been a very clear view around trying to mature the overall program robustly but quickly, to make sure where we are seeing those challenges, we are seeing them early on and not very late in the stage of development. So in terms of the rail programs, yes, some of the challenges have been when delivery has started. What else can we be doing in advance of that? So whether it's more intrusive surveys at earlier stages of development to make sure we understand some of those downstream delivery challenges. And as you've mentioned as well, we do have the delivery director, and that again has been built up around some clear recommendations around enhancing the delivery capability and maturity of the organisation, applying best practice where we can. But there is an awful lot of lessons learned over the last few years, which will help with that overall maturity.
I'm all right in thinking that we really expect local authorities and partners to start picking up the pace from now on, in order to try and stop the back-ended nature of the programme.
I think it's a combination of things. It isn't just around doing things really quickly. It is about doing them robustly and trying to maintain the programs that have been established. I mean, there is a risk sometimes by moving quickly, we're missing key bits of development out, which then lead to downstream issues. It's getting a robust set of development to inform that delivery, which is absolutely crucial. As Deputy SRO, that's one of the things that I'm really pushing with all of our, even our internal teams as well as the local authority teams, around having open, transparent conversations that allow us to have, again, as Councillor Slay has picked up, open, transparent conversations with DfT in between these reporting cycles, so there are no surprises around what it is that we're actually dealing with. So we will continue to push that pressure. I've made the point earlier around just capacity in the system. We've spoken of the important, we've noted the importance of dealing with disruption on the network as we're delivering all of these projects. So making sure we have one view around how we program all of this, so we're not creating undue pressure on networks across the region as we deliver. There is an awful lot of delivery to do. We absolutely accept that. And we just need to think about sequencing that in a way which works in terms of managing overall resources and the impact on the network.
I think perhaps what we want is now surprises, so that it's about local authorities flagging things up
Absolutely.
early on, so that we can be agile enough to actually try and deal with that.
Yeah. No, agreed.
I think the other thing is these projects require a match funding of 120 million, and so far we only have 15.92. Is that correct? Just wondering, if there going to be any problems there.
We're doing the analysis now. Obviously, we've done the work through the capital pressures report. I went to CA Board on Friday. We are doing some further work with the local authorities to inform, does there need to be a more expansive rebaseline and consolidated position of where we are. As part of that, we will pick up the local contribution elements and make sure that we can maintain the requirement. The initial analysis suggests that we are there or thereabouts. We do need to do some more detailed work around that.
So at that point, I think, unless anybody's got any more questions, we'll move on to the recommendations, which are pretty straightforward. Note the progress and approve the submission of the annual report for the DfT. Everybody happy with that?
Agreed.
With me. I'll have those flagged up, or I'll be working from a laptop. Sorry, the dashboards. Sorry. Can I have myself to Nick Alquick, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So agenda items 8, 9 and 10 are the public information dashboards managed by West Midlands Development Capital for the Loan and Grant Fund. As usual, I will provide a full update under private session unless there are any questions at this point.
Any questions at this point? Any questions? Mr. Slade? Right, we move on to item 11, which is the Coventry Very Lights rail. So I'd like to pass over to Lydia Small, please.
Oh, sorry, I'm in the room. I was going to be online, but I decided to run you all. This report basically sets out a changing governance process particularly for this Coventry Very Light Rail project within the Very Light Rail Regional Programme. So originally, when the strategic outline business case was approved, it was recommended that the council return to investment board for approval to progress from one stage gate to the next. This paper tables a change in that governance process and seeks delegated authority to the chief executive in consultation with the section 73 and 151 officer to basically approve release of funding to Coventry to enter into grant agreement for the next stage. So the key things to note are that there is the Coventry Very Light Rail programme is now being treated as an R&D programme. It's not under transport delivery project. We've worked very hard with DfT to establish a new process, and there is a robust assurance process in place with an independent review panel now being appointed to review and robustly challenge the technical elements of the Coventry Very Light Rail programme, which feels appropriate given the nature of the project. So there's a rolling stock of crack specialist, case for safety, and a commercial expert on the panel. So this paper is basically requesting approval to enter into grant agreement for stage gate 2. The funding has been released by DfT. They've released 15.1 million in total to date. And for future stage gates to use the independent review panel and seek those delegated powers as set out in the report.
Any questions at all?
I mean, this matter did come up at full board last Friday. I think the general view that this is the right way forward, basically.
Okay, there's just the one point, presumably any changes to the programme actually have to come back to the board.
Yeah, I think other than what states in the paper, Nicola was probably going to say as well that it was also for those interested that there's a breakdown of costs for what's been sought to approve, but because of commerciality, that's taken after it goes into the private papers. So we take our sort of exclusion of press and public effects. We can continue the item, but it's a breakdown.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Just one question, one small question.
Yes, against
Thank you. Just one question. Just on my note, I believe prior investment panel has requested someone with commercial equity experience to sit on the technical panel. Has that actually happened as yet?
That can happen. The technical panel is just in flight at the moment.
It's in flight at the moment.
Right. So apart from the one aspect that goes into private session, are we happy with taking the other recommendations as read? Yeah. Move on to item 14 then. All right. Oh, sorry. So at this point, yeah, you'll have to bear with me. This is the first meeting, right? We're now going into private session, and I'll read out the statement. Exclusion of the public and press in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972. The public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, as they're likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as specified in the paragraphs of the Act. So we're now going